A thief can use a small device to secretly scan and steal your credit card information. This pickpocketing technique captures your card details in seconds without any physical contact, putting your finances at risk. But if you have a Ridge wallet built with RFID protection,
because I need a deposit because I'm moving somewhere else. I am back. Bro.
as the trunk of the tree died, its branches collapsed to the ground. But deep inside the soil, the roots stayed alive. A new trunk pushed up through the earth, and the tree was reborn, only to die and regrow, century after century. When researchers finally found it and sampled the preserved roots, tests showed they were over 9,000 years old, meaning the tree had been alive since the end of the last ice age. They built legs on the research station to keep it off the ground. You see, if the snow collected on the building, it would harden into ice, eventually burying the entire thing. But the legs allowed snow to blow underneath. And if the snow starts to pile up, hydraulics lift the legs one at a time, while snow is packed under them until the whole thing is raised. And if a crack starts to form in the ice nearby, ski-shaped feet allow it to be towed one module at a time before it's put back together in a safer location. The chimp learned sign language as she grew up and was treated like part of the family. But when she tried to have babies of her own, they both tragically died. After that, she stopped eating and barely talked to her owners, except to make the sign for baby over and over again. Years later, a volunteer got pregnant, and the chimp was fascinated by her growing belly and constantly asked about the child. But, just like the chimp, the woman tragically lost her baby. When they saw each other again, the woman explained, "My baby died." The chimp looked her in the eyes, then slowly put her fingers to her cheeks, making the sign for her cheeks, making the sign for cry, before giving the grieving mother a comforting hug. The chimp learned sign language as she grew up and was treated like part of the family. But when she tried to have babies of her own, they both tragically died. After that, she stopped eating and barely talked to her owners, except to make the sign for baby over and over again. Years later, a volunteer got pregnant, and the chimp was fascinated by her growing belly. Layer the pasta, sauce, and cheese. He stuffed a note in a box. Layer the pasta, sauce, and cheese directly onto a heavy-duty foil and wrap it tightly so no water can get inside. Then place the packet on the bottom rack of the dishwasher and start the normal wash cycle, choosing the sanitize settings for extra heat. As the dishwasher runs, the hot water and layer the pasta, sauce, and cheese directly onto a heavy-duty foil and wrap it tightly so no water can get inside. Then place the packet on the bottom rack of the dishwasher and start the normal wash cycle, choosing the sanitize settings for extra heat. As the dishwasher runs, the hot water and steam heat up the foil, which slowly cooks the lasagna inside. And once the cycle finishes, you should end up with a dishwasher lasagna that's ready to eat. He stuffed a note in a bottle and threw it over the waterfall. You see, the family had hiked to the falls and tried to climb down, but the rope that was usually there had disappeared. The journey back would take 3 days, and the canyon walls were too steep to take a shortcut. So the father pulled out a receipt and wrote, "Stuck at waterfall, get help." The message went over the falls and floated for a quarter mile until another group of hikers found it. They called for for help, and a helicopter rescued the family just hours later. When you push a wheelbarrow through grass, the wheel will bounce and nearly tip over. But if you push it down the same path again, the grass will start to bend more. Keep repeating it, and the wheel starts to carve a shallow groove into the dirt. Over time, it fits perfectly in that track. It gets so deep that trying to go anywhere else becomes difficult because the wheel keeps falling back into the rut. Your brain works the same way. The first time you check your phone out of boredom, you have to think about it. But repeat it enough times, you find yourself reaching for your phone on default all of the time. Stuck in the rut you carved for yourself. He dropped the needle onto her eye accidentally, so he took it out and handed her a wet tissue before continuing to do the root canal. But the bacteria from her mouth started growing inside her eye, and soon enough, she woke up with a severe infection. She rushed to the hospital, and even though the doctors tried everything, her eye eventually had to be cut out. She sued the dentist for not giving her protective glasses, which could have easily prevented the accident that left her permanently half blind. If CPR doesn't work, they'll declare you dead, but then the doctor will wait, watching you closely as they time 10 minutes, since you could suddenly gasp for air. Now, nobody knows exactly why this happens, but some say it's because CPR can overfill your lungs, which could put pressure on your heart. And once they stop and declare you dead, that pressure goes down, allowing your heart to suddenly start beating again, bringing you back from the dead and terrifying the doctor. If CPR doesn't work, he stood neck deep in the ocean, waiting as the cold slowed down his heart. But when authorities arrived, they just stood on the shore and watched. They called the Coast Guard, but the boat never arrived. A woman tried to rescue him, but police told her not to. And even when the man collapsed, they did nothing. Finally, a civilian pulled him to shore. It was too late. The family sued, arguing that authorities should have saved him. But they said it wasn't their responsibility to save the man's life, and a judge agreed, throwing the case out. He stood neck deep in. They grew the brain cells on a tiny chip. Then the chip connected the cells to a simple version of Pong. When the cells moved the paddle and hit the ball, the system sent back a reward. But when they missed the ball, the system gave them a punishment. Over time, this feedback caused the cells to change how they moved the paddle, and they started hitting the ball more often, proving that brain cells outside of a body can still learn.
Wait overnight. And then watch this. I'm soft again. Scoop me like sand.
He slipped through the bars of a second-floor balcony. His body fell through the gap, but his head got stuck, leaving him hanging in the air. People on the street saw him and rushed to stack nearby chairs into a tower. Then one man climbed up and grabbed the boy's legs, holding his weight to keep his neck from being crushed. For several minutes, he held him up until the boy's grandma got inside the apartment and pulled the toddler back up, completely unharmed. He slipped through the bars of a second-floor balcony. His body fell through the gap, but his head got stuck, leaving him hanging in the air. People on the street saw him and rushed to stack nearby chairs into a tower. Then one man climbed up and grabbed the boy. If you shuck it, the knife can slip off the shell and stab you. Instead, fold up a tea towel and wrap your thumb in it. Then lay it on the table and wedge the oyster under your thumb, with the hinge facing out. Push the knife between the shells and twist it to separate them. Then slide the blade around until the lid comes off. Finally, cut the mussel out of the shell and suck it out. But if a grain of sand had found its way into your oyster, it could be covered in a protective layer, which could have turned it into a pearl. So you should always check your oysters before swallowing them. If you He fell onto the tracks, and the train rolled over his legs, slicing them off. When he recovered, he struggled to work at his railway job, so he bought a baboon and brought it to work. It copied the man by watching him, and whenever the baboon heard the train whistles, it learned to pull the right levers, switching the tracks. After testing it for its skills, the railway officials hired it full-time, paying it 20 cents and half a beer. And for the next 9 years, legend says it never made a single mistake. When the roller coaster drops, your intestines float up as the rest of you falls down. And as the ride goes on, you feel like your organs are moving out of place until you finally come to a stop. You see, your intestines are pretty loosely held inside your body. So when you start to fall, your organs lag behind because they aren't rigidly attached. This creates a split second of near weightlessness, which makes the nerves around them blast signals up to your brain, giving you the feeling that your stomach has dropped. When the roller coaster dropped, the man was sentenced to the death penalty, but he was too fat for the injection to work properly. You see, he had gained over 200 pounds in prison, so instead of just one needle, they might have needed hundreds of them, meaning he would suffer a long, painful death. The governor stepped in to change his sentence, and even though he was given life in prison instead, he ended up dying from health issues 7 months later. Inside, 2 tiny nozzles slide into each ear canal. One sends in a warm stream of cleaning fluid through super tiny holes near the tip. The fluid loosens wax packed deep inside, swirling it into the stream. Then another channel sucks